Good morning. I guess it's afternoon where you are because you're in Riga, and I'm in Boston. So we're going to have an interview, and I'm so happy that both of you agreed to do this. And we'll begin this interview by asking you to both introduce yourselves and to describe the Gedenkdienst, what it is, what it means. How does that sound as a start?
Yeah, sounds good. All right. So my name is Kilian Ottitsch. I'm from Austria, but currently in Riga until next June. And I'm currently working at the Janis Lipke Memorial here in Riga as my Gedenkdienst, which is a program from Austria, which I will try to explain with Constantin in a second, who will introduce himself as well.
Exactly. Like Kilian already said, my name is Constantin. I'm also stationed in Riga as my Gedenkdienst, and I work at the Jewish Museum in Latvia.
And I am also an Austrian, and I'm familiar with Gedenkdienst, and I think it's a wonderful program. So I'm thrilled to be working with both of you, and you're both actually working on the Locker of Memory Facebook page. So I'm completely grateful that you're bringing your freshness and your insights to this page and to this work. Can you explain how Gedenkdienst works and why you decided to join this organization?
Okay, if I may start. In Austria, there is still an involuntary military service that every male citizen has to fulfill after completing school. But there are a few alternatives that you can take up if you don't want to serve in the army. For example, you could work with an ambulance or in a kindergarten or elderly people's home. But there's also the Auslandsdienst, which is an organization funded by the Austrian Ministry of the Interior, which sends young people like me and Kilian all over the world to do something productive with their time that they would otherwise serve in the military. For example, we both work in the branch of the Gedenkdienst, which is mainly focusing on commemorating past events which have some ties to Austria or Europe's history. So we do our personal duty in remembering the victims or the survivors of, for example, the Holocaust or other genocides and massacres.
Kilian, is there anything you want to add to this?
Yes, what I wanted to add to that is, aside from Gedenkdienst, obviously there's other branches as well in the Auslandsdienst, which are the social, sorry, the social branch and
Peace,
the peace branch.
peace
Yes,
branch, yeah.
sorry, you're right. Which both go into different kind of
Yeah, they mainly go into different directions primarily. For example, they work with some sort of environmental projects or developmental projects in third world countries mainly. So they differ quite a lot from our branch of Gedenkdienst.
So Kilian did not just have a memory problem. He's speaking in English, which is not his native language. I don't speak German, so I'm grateful that they can speak English. And so you're also not only Austrian speaking German, you're speaking English, and you're working in Riga, which is where people are speaking Latvian. So it really puts a lot of pressure on you in terms of how you find your words and how you really describe something. And memory is such a nuanced topic. It's so personal. And to have to describe these feelings in another language that's not your native tongue puts stress on each of you. But with that said, we will continue. And one of the things, well, first, let's not skip this point. Why did you join the Gedenkdienst, and why did you decide that doing work related to the Holocaust was meaningful?
Yes, so I decided to do the Gedenkdienst mainly because I was not that interested in going into the military, but I also wanted to do something a bit different to the standard working in a hospital. Not that that's a bad thing, obviously, it's still really helpful and a lot of people do it, and I think it's a great part of Austria's kind of health network. But I was interested in doing something a bit different, and going abroad is always something that sounded interesting to me. And doing remembrance work in at the same time as being abroad sounded just amazing to me. So that's how I became interested in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my personal reasons are actually quite similar to his. I also wasn't really interested into doing any military service, and also I wanted to spend my time productively and have something at the end that I could look back on and be proud of. Furthermore, I've always been quite interested in history, so that also was a empowering factor regarding that. And of course, the chance to do something abroad was always interesting to me as well. So I took all these factors into account, and then I stumbled upon the Gedenkdienst, which basically fulfilled this entire list. So that's how I ended up here.
So one of the thoughts I had in terms of our having this conversation has to do with the how Austrians prepare youth to understand the history of the country. And particularly how Holocaust history is taught in the schools, and how it's talked about in families, and how you have your own personal encounters or memories with this history. So if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it's unique. I think that certainly in the US, there's some gaps in education in terms of how comfortable we are talking about difficult histories. So if you could, share with us your impressions and experiences of learning about the Holocaust, I think that'd be great.
All right, I'll just start if that's all right. I think in general, most Austrians, at least today, learn quite a lot about the Holocaust and all the stuff around it in school. But I don't think that it has always been this way, because until the mid to late 90s, Austria's always been sort of in a victim position when it came to World War II, instead of a perpetrator or accomplice position, which it is now, and internationally also is looked at that way. And I think when it comes to a personal experience, I think in many families, and I've also heard that in many families, it's sort of a forbidden topic, or a topic that isn't really talked about a lot. I mean, everybody knows what happened, and I think it is a certain sense of shame that leads to people trying to avoid having conversations about that. But in my personal experience, in my own family, we've always had frequent discussions about historical topics, not just the Holocaust or World War II, but in general. And the Holocaust was a frequent topic in those discussions. So I personally did a lot of research and took a big interest apart from my scholar studies regarding the Holocaust. So I think that's something that isn't very widespread in Europe, at least. I think in countries like Germany, Austria, and other parts which were part of the former Third Reich, I think that is more common in those areas than in the rest of Europe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, what I could say to in terms of like how it's taught, obviously don't have much to compare because I only went to school in Austria and a little bit in Ireland, but whatever. But I do think that in general, you go into detail a lot more, and it's even part of not just the history subject, but also German. So in 8th grade, you would usually, aside from having normal topics such as poetry and whatever for language, you also have literature that relates to the Second World War, which is in addition to what you learn in history. And I do think that it's from a whole new perspective as well, that maybe you would get just through the history subject. And in terms of like my family, it was never taboo or anything in my case, at least with my parents. But when it comes to my grandparents, it's a bit different, I think, because my grandma always said that it is something she's aware of, but she does not like to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But to add on to that, she was born after the war, so I don't know how that affects it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you were in classes and you were talking about this material, did you have conversations with friends, like private, personal conversations, where you tiptoed into this topic? What was that like? Or did it never come up? It only came up if the teacher sort of created a lesson plan. Were there other times when, or do you remember a question that someone asked in a class that you thought, whoa, that's quite a question?
I mean, in my case, it was quite similar. It was quite similar, like the way I had discussions or just conversations with my family. It also appeared in my friend group or even in class, because my teacher, he liked to just allow us to talk about anything we wanted. Pretty much, he enjoyed us having discussions with him, monitoring what we said and kind of responding to it. And it was quite interesting because the Holocaust, it was a topic that came up sometimes, but not as often as you'd expect from a country that was involved in the whole organization and execution of this horrifying event. So I found it quite, how should I put this, a bit of strange or ignorant that we didn't address it as much as I felt would do the victims and survivors justice. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kilian, is there anything you want to add?
Not really. I would say it's kind of the same where, well, the difference is that both my history teachers that I had in school were not as motivated as you probably should be as a teacher, which really hurt in that regard. But as I said, through German as well, I still got, enough aside from what I already knew and what I taught myself, obviously. Um, so I would say we did have discussions, especially because of the literature that we had to read in German for the subject, obviously, that was relating to the Second World War and the Holocaust. But off the top of my head, there's no real question where I thought how could you think that or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So no.
How do you think? I think it's really just a great opportunity that the Gedenkdienst exists and that you have this chance to dig into this history in a very serious context. So what I'm interested in as a director and as an artist is all the different forms of memory, and how, I think about the concept of ambivalent memory, so that, some countries really have a great deal of ambivalence about remembering this memory. Also, as people age, they have different relationships to the memory. Can you think about that in your own, you're both young, but can you think about that in your own lives in terms of different ways that you remember this history, and how, I mean, the idea is that we develop our consciousness over time. And how has that happened for you individually and personally? And what factors came in that changed your opinion about something? These are hard questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to put it that way, how my memory was, affected by other people's opinion. Is that what you're kind of asking?
Yeah,
Okay.
or how you were influenced, or how your memory changed over time.
Yes. So, what I can say is, as I already mentioned, my grandma, who was born after the war, who obviously had my great grandma as her mother, still told some stories to me. And to give a bit of context, I come from a rural area where there was a mass grave that is to this day unlocated of Jews that was a shooting. Sorry, and there is kind of this rumor in the small town that it's like, oh yeah, some of the old people actually know where it is, but none of them want to say it. And it's I've known this rumor since kindergarten, which is a long time, and obviously formed my own opinion on it from the start, where I was like, that sounds kind of weird that some people would not talk about this. But obviously, as I became older, I was questioning if there is either truth to this rumor, or as to why that would make sense. And to this day, this discussion is kind of still going on in the background. It's not a main topic, obviously, because you can't force someone to say something they might not even know. But that is something where I would say my memory of that time has always been kind of affected as to why someone would want to talk about it or not talk about it or lie about it.
Yeah, when it comes to me, I think the knowledge I have about this part of history can be split up into three groups. The first one is what my parents and family told me when I was young, before the topic came up in school. And what they told me was, of course, dumbed down and majorly oversimplified, because I was a little child and it didn't want to scare me, because I was still quite sensitive. So it was just the basics of this whole topic. And it isn't really something, I don't really remember what it was specifically, what part they did and did not tell me, because it mixes in with what I learned later, which already leads me to the second group, which is what I was told in school. And this was a bit different, because I didn't have the same sort of relationship or attachment to my teachers than I had to my family. So it was a bit more difficult and more estranged what they told me. I didn't really understand it at first. Maybe I didn't really want to believe it. So it was quite tricky to actually understand what they tried to convey. And then the third part is what I learned through my own research and own interest. And this was definitely the easiest to learn for me, because I could decide myself which rabbit hole I wanted to go down, what I wanted to learn, how much I wanted to learn of which part of this topic. And so I basically came to the conclusion that self-study is, at least for me, the most comfortable way of remembering this part of history, because I have a personal, unbiased view onto the topic that I can vary and change however it suits me and however I feel most comfortable with.
Thank you so much for answering these really tough questions. I'm going to throw one more tough question at you. This idea of having made this commitment to this internship, to this memory, sort of gives you a position of leadership. In some ways, you are becoming experts on this history. You're really focused on it, and now in a different country. So now you have a new perspective of how memory is practiced in Latvia and how that compares to Austria. So how do you feel about this responsibility of having this knowledge? And how do you expect to use it in your life in terms of your own leadership and your own speech and your own way of bringing up difficult subjects? Because there are always difficult subjects that people want to avoid. But can you think, for instance, of a time, and this is a very difficult question, when someone said something to you in your company, you overheard someone say something that you know wasn't true, or that you know was a racist statement, and how did that sit inside of you? And did you speak up? And as you now are more comfortable with your own voices and your own thinking about this history, what do you expect your role will be going forward?
I mean, from my personal experience, fortunately, I haven't had any incident where a friend of mine or somebody I knew personally made a statement which I found to be untrue or actually racist or offensive in any other way. But so I basically resorted to the sort of cliche for a history nerd like me, correcting wrong people on the internet on a large scale. And I think doing this Gedenkdienst here in Riga and doing my service this way and fulfilling my duty sort of gives me a certain sense of expertise and professionalism that sort of will strengthen or enlarge my arguments if I have discussions with people online who deny or distort history or the Holocaust. Just last week, I stumbled over an account on TikTok where they claimed that the Holocaust never happened, and it was just like a big conspiracy by Jewish families to gain world dominance. And so I had like sort of I think a 2 or 3 hour discussion with them on some sort of message board, and I really was in disbelief when it came to some of the things that those people had to say and to express. And I felt like I couldn't even blame them, because they just seemed so arrogant and basically uninformed that they maybe really believed what they expressed. But I still felt the responsibility to correct them and at least try to give them a new perspective in the most civil way. I had to contain myself a lot from not actually becoming angry at these people. But yeah, that's basically how I feel.
That's a great example. Kilian, do you have anything to add?
I have actually made experiences with someone being blatantly just racist or controversial. But to be fair, that person was drunk, and is also known as a very radical person. And I don't know him that well personally. But anyway, he did the whole lot of raising the hand, exclaiming the chant a few times, and just, shouting at someone and being generally aggressive towards basically anything you could be like aggressive towards. So he is homophobic and racist and everything. And he is known in town as that person, and you would generally try to avoid him. At least if you have some kind of, yeah, most people avoid him anyway. But it's always weird to see that person do that and being kind of not unable to say something. But from my experience, I know that that person is so far off the deep end that there is no point in trying to correct that person, and instead it's just better to ignore him and leave him be, which is all right as long as you're aware that you can't really change him and he can't change anything either from where he stands at the moment. So it's best to just leave him do his thing and try to avoid him.
That makes sense in terms of how, to figure out what can be a conversation and what is not going to go in that direction. So in summary, is there anything you want to close with? And also thinking about your role on Facebook, thinking about your role in relationship to the Locker of Memory Project. This is also a camp that has not been remembered with signage and a memorial. And there is the concept of a mass grave on this land. So this is kind of unfinished business. So how does that register for you in terms of your own learning and in terms of a process that probably won't get resolved in the next 6 months, but that it's going to be ongoing, and your contributions are valuable to how people understand this history? Any thoughts about that experience of being sort of coordinating Facebook and really the role of developing conversations about history that is not fully documented?
I mean, please go ahead.
No,
okay,
it's fine.
So I think it's like you said, Karen. It is a process that won't be resolved within the next 6 months or even the next 6 or 10 years. You never know. But I still feel a certain sense of pride for having done my part, no matter how small it is. Which is, I would also advise as many people as possible to actually, for example, visit the Facebook page and try to learn more about Jungfernhof or about basically any other historic topic regarding the Holocaust as well, because you can do your part of duty no matter how small or insignificant it may seem. It is always something that helps on a larger scale. So, and even tiny deeds or tiny events can have big impacts and lasting effects. So yeah.
Thank you.
I can just add myself onto that, that I do think it's really nice to kind of help develop something in that direction, and that I do think it's definitely necessary, and a shame that it doesn't exist already, some kind of a way to remember of that history. And yeah, it feels good to be able to add something and develop something, even though it's probably not in the time where I am here in Riga.
We never know, miracles happen. But yes, I am so grateful for your work, and I'm so grateful for this interview. I think you really gave us an inkling of how your school and education and families, helped shape your memories. But that a lot of what you're doing today is really an independent decision that you made. And it really is a reflection on your own ethics and maturity and commitment to becoming, fully engaged citizens. So I thank you. Austria thanks you. Latvia thanks you. And I think we'll stop the interview now. I'm going to close the recording.